You know, when I was young, Mama Jumbo said to me, she said, son, that 28 Weeks Later flick was proper shit. If only it was made 20 years later and featured Jimmy Savile-style ninja chavs and Jason Momoa dongs, all coupled with diminishing returns and half the horror and dread. Well, lucky for her, all her dreams came true last year. Shame she didn't stick around to see it and instead fucked off to Spain with her toy boy lover.
Fuck you!
Anyway, here we are with a sequel already to last year's largely disappointing instalment. Arrows blazing, schlongs swinging, and ready to offend and disgust in equal measure. And that's just Ralph Fiennes' full frontal nude scene.
Now that's what I'm talking about!
Now listen up. The first part of this review will be spoiler free, before I then go on to break down the good, the bad, and the downright cringe-inducing horror schlock. Buckle up, boys! So the plot goes like this. A little after young Spike is groomed into joining a Jimmy Savile tribute gang what love outdoor parkour and random Power Ranger acrobatics because reasons, so Jimmy Crystal makes efforts to consolidate power amidst terrorising local farmers. Whilst across the way, the original Orange Man, Dr. Kelson, tries to humanise his pet monster mate by doping him up to his eyeballs and giving him free impromptu talking therapy sessions. Honestly, it's not as bad as it sounds to be fair. Naturally, the two stories end up on a collision course with one another, and shit just escalates from there. So, enough with the chit chat. Is this better than the first, and is it worth your time and spondoolies to go and watch it in cinemas? Well, yeah, sorry I said it. As someone who thought the first year's movie was all stunning style over substance, this one was all substance over style. Gone are the hyper-real and over-stylised cinematography shots, and what remains here is stripped-back camera work that simply allows the story to take centre stage. In fact, it's Nia DaCosta's best work to date, and I have no problem eating my words from the end of my last review for my fears that she may not deliver anything but the usual disappointing nothing burgers of cringe.
I stand corrected, said the man in the orthopaedic shoes. Cracking.
Similarly, Garland's script has more meat on the bones here than his first go-around, and crucially, far less plot holes left nagging at the base of your own bone temple after you leave the screening.
Oh, thank God.
The gore and visceral violence is defo not spared here, and although a quieter and more focused study this time around, it still finds time to turn your stomach and certainly doesn't skimp on the horror when necessary.
Yeah, that's what I like to hear!
Which leads me on to the problems with the film, which stem mainly from the fact that it's indeed a more measured movie than the first, focusing on psychology, behaviour and theme rather than horror and ethereal visual style. And of course in the process, much of the tension and outright claustrophobic terror the franchise is known for is lost even further than the second sequel last year. And honestly, whether you'll have a good time with this or not depends solely on how long you can tolerate Jack O'Connell's shtick. I mean, I enjoyed it immensely, but if it's already grating on you by the end of the first act, then you're probably not going to make it to the end with a smile.
No chance, mate. No chance.
And speaking of, it's interesting how the filmmakers never actually explain the Savile connection in this film and is instead just left to subtext. Which is probably wise. In that preserved cut-off timeline, Sir Jimmy was still a heroic national treasure who could do no wrong, and not the reviled Savile that he's known to be today.
Dirty bastard.
So to this Jimmy in the movie's timeline, his outward external expression is as much a proud subversion as his upside down cross adorned to his blasphemous neck. As was his obsession with Teletubbies, given it was his last connection with modern life before his master Satan called him to perform his work. And thus they take on a new meaning for him. Unfortunately though, old Spike is completely underserved throughout the film, and largely even forgotten about for most of the runtime, no longer serving as a narrative lead, but now rendered back into the role he served in the first act of last year's film, simply being dragged around by external forces and without the ability to express his own agency. One can't help but wonder if Spike's character has regressed by the knees of the plot and lazy writing, or if it's merely a natural reaction to the escalating events. Should he not be more hardened by now, given everything he went through in the first flick? Or is the film happy to reset him back to the cowardly, hesitant, bewildered young boy that we saw him as at the start of the first film, simply to make a point about cyclical natures of violence, trauma, and coming of age in a world void of modernity?
That's a great question. I've been wondering that myself.
In the end though, it's Jack O'Connell's film through and through. Watching him preach to his flock to condition them back into his subverted batshit worldview was compelling as fuck. To the point that even I was almost convinced to don a tracksuit and go run a few charity races and slice off some titties. Before everything culminates in an electrifying finale where the two leads go toe to toe in a beautifully shot climax amidst the eponymous temple monument.
Nice.
Ultimately, this sequel is more like The Walking Dead meets Eden Lake rather than 28 Days Later. But if you like the first film, there'll be defo parts of this that you enjoy. I guess it just depends on which aspects you like specifically. Because if you came for more Jodie Comer and Aaron Taylor-Johnson, then prepare to be disappointed, my guy. But if you came for, let's say, some other award-winning actors who were previously iconic in the franchise, well, I can neither confirm or deny nothing or nothing at this point in time.
Oh, you tease. You big tease.
Okay, now that's it for the non-spoiler section, so here's your final warning. Now let's go and break some shit down.
Finally!
As stated, there's far more meat on the bones in this one than last time, so let's get a bit more serious for a minute. Specifically, one of the film's most interesting thematic tensions lies in how it contrasts its two principal antagonists to interrogate the idea of irredeemability. Bone Temple repeatedly asks if anyone is truly beyond saving, and whether moral collapse is a result of conscious choice or of psychological breaks forced upon them from beyond their control. Alpha's arc gestures toward the possibility of redemption, but not because he undergoes any kind of moral reckoning. As the doc explains, the virus is forcing Alpha to see things that aren't there, externalising his rage and distorting his perception of reality. His violence then is not chosen in any meaningful sense, but imposed unto him by an infection that overrides cognition itself, something that can be interrupted at least temporarily through medical intervention. In this framing, Alpha is not irredeemable, he's simply rendered mentally ill by physical pathogen. Conversely, Sir Jimmy initially appears to function as his thematic opposite. Unlike Alpha, he's physically uninfected, relatively lucid, and seemingly in full control of his actions, but committing equally extreme acts of violence while technically retaining his physical humanity. Yet the film itself gradually undermines this distinction. Jimmy's belief that he is indeed the son of Old Nick, aka Satan himself, and that the outbreak is not a biological event but actually a metaphysical one, reveals that he too is operating with a falsified, distorted reality. His worldview directly contradicts Kelson's rational, atheistic explanation, perhaps reframing Jimmy's brutality as the product of a psychological collapse rather than conscious evil. In this sense, Jimmy's mind has been overtaken just as thoroughly as Alpha's, and not by a virus of the body, but by a symbolic mind virus of belief. By aligning these two figures, Bone Temple refuses to offer an easy hierarchy of guilt. Is Alpha more redeemable because his perception was hijacked by biology, and while Jimmy's was corroded by trauma, power, ideology and grief? Or does the distinction collapse entirely once both are understood as men acting under equal delusion? The film leaves that question deliberately unresolved, challenging the audience to consider whether irredeemability is a matter of cause, choice, or simply the stories we tell ourselves about sanity. Interestingly, that tension crystallises in the train sequence following Alpha's treatment. As his infection recedes and he begins to return to a recognisably human state, banging on about how he ain't got a fucking ticket or some shit, the infected lot who once followed him immediately turn aggro. Alpha's recovery destabilises the hierarchy and shared delusion that once bound them together, and the collective naturally responds with violence.
Standard.
The scene closely mirrors how cults often react when a member begins to recover or attempt to get the heck out of Dodge. The individual's awakening threatens the belief system itself, provoking punishment rather than empathy. The arch-cultist immediately turns from alpha to outsider. In this sense, the infected operate less like mindless monsters and more like adherents defending a worldview that cannot survive scrutiny. Which just seems pretty apt, at least in modern day to be fair. Anyway, enough of all that gay shit, on to things I loved. Scooping out brains like a juicy coconut. Finally watching a horror movie so viscerally sick, I had to turn away from the screen watching the shirts be removed. It's also great how they address a complaint I had from the last movie here, and actually show the consequences of characters fighting in close quarters with zero protective gear.
Not a great plan.
Kelson and Samson's subplot vignettes were also cool. Well, once I got over the current day writers once again nerfing once brutal monsters, a la Alien Bloody Earth making Xenos pet lapdogs, and whatever the heck was going on with Predator Badlands.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
Also funny how Alpha Bro stopped looking for his baby and instead got distracted by his constant jonesing for more and more of the old orange soda, from his baldy Breaking Bad supplier, what loves getting strange men high, and then dancing around with their pliable naked bodies.
Disgusting!
Meanwhile, Kelson was going to go full Canadian maid and euthanise the poor drugged up sod without his consent. Well, Tilly says the word moon and soon proves he has more cognitive function than most politicians in Parliament.
Fact check.
That's true.
The potential symbolism of Kelson's nude scene was also fun, becoming more like his new Hulk buddy pet boy, as Samson continues to become more like him, mainly by standing around and doing fuck all day. I also like that the Jimmy gang were mostly true believers. I mean, turns out Jimmy was actually bona fide insane, and not just acting or pretending to be unearthly ordained merely to remain in charge. As mentioned before, his mission to form a fist from fingers or some shit ultimately led him to being crucified upside down, like the cross of dawn to his unholy throat. And yeah, it's hardly subtle stuff, but his fate still makes for a good bit of cosmic irony. Anyway, director DeCosta gets good work out of her actors here, even Erin Kellyman, who's finally bloody decent in a role for once, and ironically the only likeable and empathetic character in a whole gang of Jimmies, and a far cry from her super annoying turns in Top Boy and Falcon and My Winter Boyfriend. Likewise, Rafe is clearly having a blast, whilst Jack O'Connell is a tour de force. And any fellow filmmakers and actors would have a bloody good mind to blacklist him, based on the amount of times this fella comes in and steals entire movies out from under him.
Yeah, that's probably good, yeah.
Finally, the Iron Maiden finale set piece was admittedly indulgent and wholly impractical when you think about the effort and resources needed to construct and light it all, but at least had an in-universe reason to exist, and by that point, I was more than happy enough to go with it. And so here's things I didn't love so much. Spike getting shafted and his character regressing somewhat as mentioned earlier, now no longer the central POV lead, and his first proper murder carries no weight, nor is it explored in any real depth. No new zombie types, and thus no more Az from Hill vs Babyface cameos. No Jodie Comer doing a Don Logan impression.
You made me look a right cunt!
Nor any more updates on the whereabouts of the abusive pussy munching daddy guy. Lame. Also, I ask again, does the morphine not build up a tolerance in the alpha? Pretty dodgy to keep risking encounters with this thing and not be sure his dosage is enough to keep him out again and again, isn't it? And by the time you get to the tacked on Killian cameo in the final moments, it all feels like we're thrust back into a wholly different kind of film. I mean, I can't really imagine Jim in the 28 years world, to be honest. He seemed like he was from a universe more gritty and grounded, and not from one inhabited by somersaulting ninja chavs cosplaying notorious sex abusers. But whatevs. Anyway, those are just my initial thoughts on the film. I'd give it 7.4 super chill morphine shots out of 10. I guess I liked it way more than I thought I would, to be honest. It's always nice to be surprised at the movies now and again. Oh well, as long as said surprise ain't a slimy Savaloy at the bottom of the popcorn bucket, if you catch me drift. But let me know what you thought of the flick down in the comments. If you liked the vid, kindly subscribe and I'll see you again next time. But if you didn't and I don't, then have a nice life I guess, pal.